Davy Crockett was a 19th century American folk hero, frontiersman, soldier, politician, and Freemason. He is commonly referred to in pop culture by the epithet King of the Wild Frontier. He represented Tennessee in the U.S. House of Representatives and served in the Texas Revolution, where he famously fought to his death at the Alamo. Or did he? I'm Jake Storielli, and this is Laughs from the Past.
I like the your last name was probably my favorite part of that accent.
Storielli.
Like belly, Storielli.
Storielli.
Oh, I like that. I wanted to update you. Someone got a hold of the Instagram account and they were watching our Diet Love Pass episode and they said, "I'm Russian. That accent sounded Indian."
Okay, I'll take it.
Yeah, close enough, right? Not
Same continent.
Not American.
I'm a continental guy.
I like
the Diet Love Pass, my friend.
yeah. How is maybe a Russian person? They don't know what an Indian accent sounds like. It all sounds different to everyone, you know.
Boom roasted.
Wow, gotcha. But thanks for
I could do the whole Diet Love Pass episode in my Indian voice.
You know, my girlfriend Katie does a fantastic Indian accent because she, in the Bay Area, she worked with a bunch of Indian women, but she thinks it's mean. But I don't think it's mean.
Yeah, like that was kind of going through my head there. Like I could see someone saying that's mean, but no, it's that was just me doing an accent.
Yeah, I don't think it's mean. It's all
good.
It's all in good fun. What about Davy Crockett? What do you know about this guy, Jake?
Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier. I don't know. I sang a song about him that had that lyric in it, apparently. I know the hat, the raccoon hat.
Yeah. Historians say he actually did wear that raccoon hat later in his life a little bit, so that's cool.
It had to be so uncomfortable. Had to be sweating bullets.
Yeah, there's people out there that are just beanie people. You know, they wear their beanies like in the summer, indoors, whenever.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Was Davy Crockett one of the first beanie people?
Yeah, yeah. He's an inspiration to many.
Wow, he's gonna be like a pop culture sensation in the Upper Northwest.
Yeah, there you go. Well, welcome to Laughs from the Past. If this is your first episode, we're in the midst of Season 3, Historical Mysteries. This is episode, I don't know, 5 or 6. I don't know. I'm lost track. But this has been a fun season so far. This mystery, I didn't know this was a mystery until I started doing it. And I was like, wait, what's the mystery here? He did die at the Battle of the Alamo, Jake.
Right.
That's not a mystery. The debate is if he fought to his death or if he surrendered and then was executed.
Okay.
What
do we have coming up? Do we have some semi-witnesses or what?
Yeah, there's semi-witnesses, and we're going to get into just like what the Alamo was and his past, and so we can try and hypothesize what we think, right?
Right.
But that's the debate in question. And for many people, it's like that's kind of semantical, don't you think? He died at the Alamo, whether he surrendered or whether he fought to his... Like, he died at the Alamo. But for Texans, for Americans in this time, there is a big difference between fighting to your death and surrendering, especially for a personality like Davy Crockett.
That's a really good point, and I think people would be surprised because if it's someone closer to us, you do look for some of those little things. So I think you're right in the big scope of America, Texas, Davy Crockett. You know, how did you go out? But you know, if someone goes out near us who's part of our family and they were like partially protecting someone else while they passed away, you know, you hold on to something like that, and it's almost like a little glimmer of hope and something like, wow, you know, they really went out the right way, which, I mean, we're fast forwarding a couple hundred years and it's a different scenario, but back then it's kind of the same thing. Davy Crockett, America.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're going to get into Davy Crockett because he's a character for sure.
Oh yeah. We like characters.
Here's a little like another overview. says, it's clear that Crockett was killed during or just after the Battle of the Alamo in 1836, but the details surrounding his death are both murky and hotly contested. A slave named Joe claimed to have spotted Crockett's body lying among a pile of deceased Mexican soldiers. Mrs. Susanna Dickinson, whose husband had also been slain in the melee, told a similar story, as did San Antonio Mayor Francisco Ruiz. So the very first stories that came out were that he fought to his death and took some Mexican soldiers down with him. But on the flip side, the New Orleans True American and a few other newspapers reported that Crockett was actually captured and, once the fighting stopped, executed by General Santa Anna's men. General Santa Anna was a bulldog.
Okay.
So there we go. Now I have a whole a chapter in a book, How Did Davy Crockett Die, written by, I don't even know. They should put the author's name on here. Okay. Tried to shout out the author. It looks like Aaron. Paul Aaron. There you go. Found it.
Paul Aaron.
Make your name easier to find, Paul. So we're going to get into this Davy Crockett. Like, do you know anything about the Alamo, Jake?
So I know some about the Alamo, and when I say that, I mean, like, you would tell me a story, and I'd be like, oh, yeah, totally. I went to, have you ever been to San Antonio?
I've never been to Texas besides airports.
That's tough, because I feel like I lived in Texas for a couple years.
You did?
So
I never came to visit you.
Just knife in my chest.
Yeah.
So I went to San Antonio once, and as you know, that was during my traveling days. And I used to get through my traveling days by usually a sports event. And so the Spurs were in town, and I was going to go to a Spurs game. But, dude, it was just one of those travel days when it all catches up. I had nothing. I just passed out in the hotel room at like 6 p.m. So I was bummed I didn't do that. And then I was like, okay, I had an afternoon in San Antonio, so I was like, okay, I could go check out the Alamo. Don't really know the whole deal over there. Or I could go check out the Riverwalk. So I went to the Riverwalk instead, which was okay. There's a river that goes through the city. There's some bars and restaurants. The Riverwalk would be cool during an event. Like if the Final Four was going on down there and the Riverwalk was like packed and people were having a good time, it would be a good time. When I saw it like on a Wednesday afternoon, it was like, okay, this doesn't do much for me. So that's my San Antonio scouting report.
Okay.
I'll also say this before we get into the depths of San Antonio, because it's kind of what we're talking about right now. I told someone, because, you know, I was from the Northeast. I used to wear my khakis tucked into my shirt. Jake from State Farm was a big joke. And when I got to San Antonio, I worked in electrical supplies, and it was just like a lot of boring, lazy white guy humor. And I said something like, yeah, you know, I'm actually from pretty far north of the Mason-Dixon. I'm originally from Connecticut. I'm a damn Yankee. Because I'd have gotten that everywhere I go. So I was like, I might as well lean into this before they try to turn it on me. And one guy, dead-eye, turns to me and he goes, man, anything north of San Antonio is the north. And I was like, whoa, all right, cool. Good party. So that's a timepiece.
Okay.
So give me a quick rundown of the Alamo, or maybe a full one. I don't know.
Well, we'll get into it when I start reading the story.
Okay.
But you know the famous saying, remember the Alamo, right?
Remember the Alamo, of course.
Because this was a stand that was going to, they knew at the time this was going to spark a bigger revolution, and then people will fight in the honor of the Alamo. So that was the big thing. Remember the Alamo. Now, I wanted to just throw it to Pee Wee Herman fast before we get into the deep things, because I'm not a huge Pee Wee Herman fan. But this clip that I'm going to include in the show right now is fantastic. Pee Wee Herman is like knocked out, and he gets woken up by a bunch of Texans, and they're trying to figure out who he is and what's going on. Do you know what I'm talking about? Here it is.
Hey, kid, what's your name?
I can't remember.
Where you from?
I can't remember.
Can't you remember anything?
I remember the Alamo.
I like that, so I included it in here. Remember the Alamo. Also a good movie with Billy Bob Thornton. Plays Davy Crockett.
It's pretty good. That might be who I'd cast for Davy Crockett now, too.
Billy Bob
Like,
Thornton?
when was that filmed?
Early 2000s.
Okay.
It's somewhat modern movie. I would guess like 2006, but I don't really know.
Run it back with Billy Bob.
It was good. Okay, so how did Davy Crockett die? Let's get into reading. Interrupt me whenever you would like. To the millions of Americans who remember Fess Parker in ABC's 1954 Davy Crockett Indian Fighter series or John Wayne in the 1960 movie The Alamo, the answer to this chapter's question is no mystery. Davy died fighting at the Alamo, along with all its other defenders. In the television version, he is last seen swinging his rifle like a club with the bodies of the Mexicans he has slain at his feet. In the movie version, he is, if anything, more heroic, blowing up the fort's powder magazine to make sure a score of Mexicans die with him. Hero in the movies and TV. So clear was this image in Americans' minds that when historian Dan Kilgore presented evidence in 1978 that Crockett had surrendered at the Alamo and was executed after the battle, Kilgore was branded as un-American. So I'm saying this shit mattered to people.
Yeah.
Yet Kilgore's evidence was not new, nor were Hollywood's versions of the first fictionalized accounts of Crockett's life and death. Crockett himself was famous as a teller of tall tales, and historians attempting to uncover the truth about his death had first to peel away many layers of legends, lies, and half-truths. Let's get into it.
This is a total, like, if in the 1990s, if someone said, you know what, I really want to do a documentary and find out if Davy Crockett, you know, died like a hero's death. Like, people would be like, don't do that, son. And now, you know, however many years later, 15, 20, however you want to look at it, like, that's so nowadays. Like, was Davy Crockett everything he was built up to be?
I like how you're saying Davy Crockett.
Yeah, I get Davy Crockett. I guess that's what I'd call him.
But I mean, yeah, historians always want to know like the truth. They don't care about legends and lore, but everyone else wants to know. Like, no, let's just
kind of.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to find out a little bit more about Crockett himself, which I think is interesting. The mythic Davy, as opposed to the real person historians refer to as David, so that they're already separating myth and real, Davy and David. He was at least in part a creation of Crockett's own making. Crockett wrote his own autobiography called A Narrative of the Life of David Crockett and is more admired by literary critics than historians. Still, it does present many of the facts of his life and reveals something, at least, of whether he was the type of man who'd fight to the end or who'd prefer to live to fight another day. In the book, he describes himself as a great hunter, a Superman from the backwoods of Tennessee who killed 105 bears in a single season. So famed was he as a hunter that, so the story went, once a treed raccoon recognized him, it would yell, "Don't shoot, I'm a-comin' down."
Who reported that?
David Crockett.
John Heyman?
Himself. So that's his autobiography. Raccoons used to yell, "Don't want to shoot, Mr. Crockett. I'm a-comin' down. I don't want to be your hat tomorrow."
No trouble here, please.
So he's a man, he's built on legend.
It's Luke Skywalker.
He's what I used to think Babe Ruth was as a little kid.
Okay.
Like, when I was little, I thought Babe Ruth was like Santa Claus. Like, they just made him up. This is kind of that situation here. All right. Above all, however, the real Crockett was a politician. I didn't know that. Using his comic drawl and his log cabin background as proof that he would fight for the interests of the common man and the Westerner in particular. He was elected to the Tennessee House of Representatives in 1821 and 1823, and to the U.S. House in 1827, 29, 31, and 33. At first, he was an ardent supporter of the other man of the people, Andrew Jackson. But Crockett broke with the president over his policies for disposing of Western lands and Indians, and was then embraced by the Whig Party. So he was kind of a man of the people. That's a nice thing. He was Andrew Jackson, Trail of Tears and all that. Davy Crockett was like, no, man, that seems fucked.
Yeah. I think we like Davy Crockett. It sounds like he had that kind of alpha, like masculinity that people loved during that time period, but he actually won them over with wit and humor.
Yeah.
Like, he had that stuff and he played off that stuff, but he was actually using wit and humor to become, an actual guy in the U.S. What was it, Congress, Senate?
Yeah, people say George Bush used, like, he dumbed down his voice to sound like that dumb Texan and, like, everyday man.
Man, by the day, I know nothing about politics, and I admit that. Basically, my political knowledge was just like Will Ferrell doing George Bush impressions. But the Derek Jeter, George Bush throwing out the first pitch during 9/11.
Uh-huh.
And then, yeah, just kind of looking back and like, George Bush was a shtick.
Oh, yeah. What
Like,
about...
he absolutely was.
You ever hear when... Well, we don't need to get into Bush, but when they threw the shoe at him, and he's like, so what? He threw a shoe? He can throw a shoe. That's allowed. You ever seen that clip?
No, I haven't seen that.
He's in some Middle Eastern country, and someone stands up and just fucking fires a shoe at George Bush's head. You never seen this? And
Oh, maybe I have.
he dodges it pretty well.
Yeah.
And then, like, the reporters ask him about it, and he's like, so what? He's allowed to throw a shoe.
So what if the guy threw a shoe at me? But let me talk about the guy throwing the shoe. I don't know what the guy's cause is, but one thing is for certain, he caused you to ask me a question about him.
It's also probably a little bit at the times now because everyone's like, oh, anything over Trump, and now George Bush is starting to get some like late love. But like,
Well,
it's all coming together for me.
It's also easier in the past to, like, laugh at it.
Right.
So the Whig Party saw Crockett after he split from Jackson. They saw him as someone who could match Jackson's image as the common man, and all that. And they thought he might even be able to challenge Crockett or Jackson for presidency. So they began ghostwriting his speeches and his books, and this is when they ghostwrote or helped him write his autobiography, because it was basically a campaign biography. So it was like to get the people to like him.
Nice.
So it was full of tall tales, and it's just playing him up as this Western frontiersman. The Whig propaganda made Crockett a national figure, a sort of Western Poor Richard, uneducated but rich in common sense and experience. But Crockett's own constituents were less impressed by him. They noted his failure to pass a land bill protecting the rights of poor settlers and squatters. They noted that, in fact, in his entire congressional career, he'd failed to get a single bill passed. Kind of doing nothing.
Yeah.
With the Jacksonians mobilized against him, in 1835 congressional election, the 1835 congressional election promised to be a tight one. Crockett promised his followers that he'd serve them to the best of his ability if they elected him, and if they didn't, you may all go to hell, and I will go to Texas. They didn't, so he did, and he goes to Texas.
There you go.
Texas was a province of Mexico at the time, but a lot of Americans were going there because it was new land, and they were
Right.
settling in there. And the Mexicans, they were like, wait, this isn't good for us. Like, because you can't just have Americans coming here and then thinking they're America and wanting to vote and have slavery become part of Texas and stuff. So Santa Anna was like, no, you're our people if you live here.
Right.
And Texas was just like, nah.
This is a little bit of a misunderstanding. We want to live here, but we don't want to be your people. We're sorry. Thank you.
Yeah. So, quite reasonably, Mexico saw these increasingly assertive immigrants as a threat to its authority and decided to outlaw new immigration and ban slavery in the province. The more militant Americans responded by declaring Texas as an independent nation and appointing Sam Houston as commander-in-chief. Like Crockett, Houston was an ex-Tennessean and an ex-congressman. Unlike Crockett, Houston remained tied to Jacksonians in the United States.
Okay.
By the time Crockett arrived in San Antonio in early February 1836, tensions were near the breaking point. Not only were the Mexican General Santa Anna and his 2,400 troops on the march towards the fort, but the Texans at the Alamo were themselves split between those who acknowledged Houston's authority and those who did not. There's a lot of guys who wanted to be in charge of Texas, because that's how it works. You get a new nation starting.
Amen.
That's why America, when George Washington was just the sole guy, it's amazing how the founding fathers formed America. It's like really impressive. And then Washington,
America.
yeah.
When Davy Crockett went to Texas, did he know that this stuff was on the horizon?
Yeah, he thought that it would lend
Okay.
him to he would gain voters in that stuff. Like he went for political promise and a new land.
Gotcha.
Houston, recognizing that the 183 men in the Alamo could not hold the fort against Santa Anna's troops, ordered its commander, Colonel William Travis, to blow up the Alamo and retreat.
Classic.
But Travis, he was part of the opposition to Houston. So he did. It was like, you're not the fucking boss of me.
Gotcha.
You're not the boss of me. Blah, 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 blah. So he refused to blow up the Alamo. The Alamo was a mission. And then the Mexicans had it as a fort, and now the Texans had it as a fort. And it's just like some fortified walls inside and all that. So that's why they're stuck at the Alamo, 183 men. And they pleaded to Houston that like losing the Alamo would change the fate because it's like a pivotal ground for an army to be, and they have access to all these other places and stuff. And
Sure.
Houston was like, yeah, but it seems like you're going to die because 2,000 to 200. So just
Yeah.
blow it up. Don't let them use it as a fort and leave. And they're like, nah, fuck you, Houston. We don't even think of you as our leader, so you can't boss us
Right.
around. We'd rather die. For real.
Amen. Yeah.
For real, yeah. It is amidst these political maneuverings that Crockett's decision to stay at the Alamo and the likelihood of his fighting to the death as opposed to surrendering must be considered. So they're saying, this guy is saying, Crockett knew this. Like, he knew that every soldier there, there was a line drawn. It was either stay and die or leave. How many people got guilt-tripped into staying and dying? What a terrible thing. Like, I'm leaving. I'm out.
Sometimes it's a bigger cause, Jim.
Oh,
It's fighting
man.
for your country, your freedom, your grandsons to come before you.
I am not in on that. I'll just go
what
to
it
Tennessee and like live there.
Yeah, that's true. There was alternative options.
It's not like they were taking over America. Like you were American.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was just the Alamo too. They could have retreated to the big army and then fought.
Yeah.
It just seemed very, very stubborn. So a lot of people stayed though to died. Crockett had come to Texas because it was a land of economic and political opportunity, not so that he can fight and die. Moreover, Crockett was no soldier. In his autobiography, he readily admitted that he hired a substitute to finish out an earlier term of enlistment. You could pay someone to fight for you if you got enlisted.
Like that.
But once he got to Texas, he found his past political afflictions threw him in with the anti-Houston and anti-Jackson forces, and these were the forces defending the Alamo. So he was stuck there. Like the people he was trying to win over, they were on the side of we're going to die. So he would kind of had to be
Right.
on their side. Doesn't make sense. The author says, of course, this doesn't prove that Crockett surrendered or that his heroic death seen as mere myth. Many have died heroically on the battlefield with less evidence of previous heroism than Crockett's life provided. What Crockett's past life proved was merely that he was the type of person who could easily have surrendered. To determine whether he actually did so, historians needed some actual witnesses. So now we get into witnesses, okay?
I was just gonna say, I mean, you were wondering why Davey did this, but here it's 2019 and we're talking about him.
Do you have a lean right now before you hear these witnesses?
My general lean coming into this, God, I don't know. It's different time periods. Like in my head, I want to say the theory of like, yo, Crocky went over there. He tried to talk his way out of it, and they still killed him. And then like the movie aspect of that would be like, you know, there's some old guy that tells like a kid like, run back, save yourself. But he goes, tell nobody that Davy Crockett went out like that. That's the movie version. I don't know, man. I think people back then were so in tune with God and like dying for an honorable cause and what you believe in that I like right now I'm leaning David Crockett just went down with the Alamo.
Guns blazing?
Yeah.
Okay, let's hear what the witnesses, those few. The obvious problem with the witnesses, at least on the American side, is that they were all dead. Once Colonel Travis used his sword to draw his famous line in the sand, and all those willing to stay and fight to the death crossed the line, the fate of the Americans was sealed. After 90 bloody minutes on the morning of March 6, 1836, they were all dead. It's like Three Ninjas.
Well, the other thing. Well, okay.
Three Ninjas, Jake. You've seen Three
Sure.
Ninjas? Are you a Three Ninjas guy?
Your favorite movie? No, I'm not a fan.
One of the second best trilogy ever, even though the third one's kind of shitty. First Three Ninjas is golden. You know what? The grandpa's biggest advice to the three kids in ninja training is?
What's that?
Never take a fight you can't win.
Right.
Because it's a recipe for disaster.
Sure.
Like you need a boxer's chance, a puncher's chance to be able to win. When it's 2,000 Mexicans and 183 non-military men,
Right.
you don't have a puncher's chance of winning.
Right.
So why take the fight?
Here's the other thing that maybe I'm leaning on this too much, but all right, I'm picturing people are scared to go to Mexico today. Again, 2019, certain parts of it. We're in Texaco. What year is this? 18 something?
1836.
1836. General life conditions across the world are pretty bad. I mean, I'm guessing this is a combination of like the afterlife being pretty hyped up, people believing in a cause. Like I'm seeing people being like, hey man, if I go out swinging in the Alamo, I'm going to shoot right up to heaven and I'm going to be, drinking out of gold cups.
Yeah, maybe.
So I think that's a factor here. I really do.
Another factor that should be said that it's not in this book, but I did other research just so I could. And Santa Anna was a bastard, man. He was ruthless and not in a bad way. He was a good military leader, but he was ruthless. And he threw down the red flag. No prisoners of war. We're not accepting surrender. If you fight against us, you will die.
Right.
The American people or the Texan people didn't make that well known to the general soldier. So some of these soldiers might have thought they can surrender and be prisoners
Fought like
of war.
hell and then did you got us. That was a hell of a battle. And then, we're dead too. Okay.
Yes, and we're coming off the Civil War, Jake. This is like a little bit at which we did all of season 2 was on the Civil War. And that was pretty friendly with the surrender situation.
Right.
They allowed surrender.
Right.
So there could have been something where these soldiers were like, well, they're not actually going to just kill all of us. They'll take us as prisoners of war. So we're doing that. Okay. So after the 90 minutes and they all die, the Mexicans spared a couple lives. They spared a slave named Joe and a woman named Susanna Dickinson. Susanna.
It's another good women's song name.
And both of those people reported of seeing Crockett's mutilated body among Mexicans. And that was like the first known thing he died fighting because of them. All right. Well, Slave Joe said that. Susanna said she did see his dead body, but it wasn't until after fighting ended for a while.
Right.
On the Mexican side, there were many survivors. And their testimony was for so long ignored can only be attributed to American chauvinism. Their testimony was for so long ignored can only be attributed to American chauvinism. So they're like, nah, we don't care what you have to say. In 1975, however, Carmen Perry translated into English the narrative of Jose Enrique de la Peña, an aide to Santa Anna and an eyewitness to Crockett's death. According to De La Peña, Crockett most definitely did not go down fighting. Rather, he was captured along with 6 others and brought before Santa Anna. Right. Drawing on his famous ability to tell tall tales, he attempted to talk his way out of his situation. He claimed that he'd merely been exploring the country around the Alamo when he'd heard of the Mexican advance. Then, fearing that his status as a foreigner might not be respected, he'd sought refuge in the Alamo. But Santa Anna didn't buy it. He ordered Crockett and the others killed, and his officers fell upon these unfortunate defenseless men just as a tiger leaps among its prey.
Couple different things. I mean, again, not knowing the war conditions, I'm assuming Davy Crockett's pretty well known coming into this battle. So, I mean, there was definitely probably some value, or even Santa Anna maybe said it before, but like, oh, if you get Davy Crockett, bring him to me. Like, I could see a little of that. That sounds like that time period, right? I don't know. Who do you trust?
I don't know. So other Mexican witnesses offered briefer but similar versions of Crockett's death. Among them were Colonel Fernando Uriza, another aide to Santa Anna, General Martin Perfecto de Cos, Santa Anna's brother-in-law, Colonel Jose, a bunch of people who led one of the assault columns against the Alamo. So they're saying a bunch of people. In spite of efforts to discredit the testimony of these Mexicans, the sheer number of witnesses to his surrender and the lack of any reliable eyewitness to his death in battle clearly favors the surrender story. At the time, many U.S. newspapers reported the surrender, as did many 19th and early 20th century histories. The revisionist view of Crockett's death can be taken too far, however. Just because he wasn't Parker or Wayne didn't mean he died in vain. Even in its surrender and execution, Crockett's death founded the attention of the United States on Texas, and money and volunteers rolled into the territory. 6 weeks after the Alamo, Sam Houston's men, crying, "Remember the Alamo," overwhelmed the Mexicans. A day later, Santa Anna surrendered.
Yeah, I got this now.
Okay.
I got this now. So I'm going to make another comparison, which I know isn't your niche market, but I already made one Star Wars reference. I'm going to make another couple quick. So I made a David Crockett comparison to Luke Skywalker. Like, even some of the hunting stories you told about David Crockett, Luke Skywalker talking about being on his home country, talking about shooting vermin. Like, that's spot on. I think the bigger thing here, and whether David Crockett went down fighting the good fight or if he tried to talk his way out of it, there's a scene in episode 4 of the Star Wars movies where Obi-Wan Kenobi, he says, "If you strike me down now, you'll make me more powerful than I've ever been." And that's exactly what happened here. No matter how David Crockett died, like, if you killed him, the people were going to come in droves to defend. Like, oh, we got another war going on. They just killed David Crockett. So that's where that is. So, I mean, in the end, killing David Crockett was a huge mistake. Do I think he went down swinging? I don't know. I've still just got a bunch of he said, she said. So, and this is the guy that described raccoons would forfeit the hunt to him. So, I don't know.
Yeah, so this article is summed up by, and I agree with this completely, nor should Crockett's surrender be confused with cowardice. Faced with insurmountable odds, Crockett made the only reasonable choice if he surrendered. De La Peña's account of the execution concludes by telling, "Though tortured before they were killed, these unfortunates died without complaining and without humiliating themselves before their torturers." Or to put it another way, Davy Crockett died like a hero. So I think it's semantical. I said that at the beginning.
Right.
But for the sake of the nation and for Texas and the revolution at the time, it is anything but semantical.
Right.
Because like you said, the propaganda among it, that'll lead an army. David Crockett surrendered and tried to talk his way out of it, but they killed him anyway. That doesn't get the juices flowing for the Texas Army and for volunteers to compete. Davy Crockett went down with the ship, killing every Mexican, screaming, "Remember the Alamo." Ooh,
Right.
that'll get your blood flowing. I think he surrendered because he was a politician and not a soldier.
Right.
And what do politicians do? They try to talk their way out of things. He was a storyteller, and he probably had a little bit of he thought of himself as a figure that maybe Santa Anna wanted to meet. Maybe Santa Anna wanted to meet him.
Right.
So I think it all adds up that he surrendered. He tried to talk his way out of it, but I do not think any lesser of him. I think lesser of the people. No, I can't say that. Un-American.
Oh, wow.
I don't blame anyone who didn't fight at the Alamo, because don't pick a fight you can't win. But I respect everyone that did.
It's the crippling fear of death.
Yes.
I don't know. I mean, that whole thing adds up. I guess the accounts saying that he did try to beg for his life, those came from the Mexican army.
Yep. Yeah, it was but it wasn't newspaper articles. It was Santa Anna's one of Santa Anna's guys' journal
Right.
that just got found. So he's not broadcasting this to anywhere.
Right. But I mean, again, still, it was different times. Like that guy could have been the biggest horse's ass today, and he could have been like, yeah, David Crockett knelt to us and was writing it in his diary that day. It would make sense that he would try. I think some of your final moments before death, you try to find a way out of dying. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it adds up that Davy would do that. I don't know. I think just the fact that he was willing to step into that fight itself, you could say he wasn't doing that. So it's almost a matter of perspective. And I think like the next time there would have been a meeting, like, you said Santa Anna was this ruthless guy, but he was still like a professional war leader. I mean, they could have peacocked a little bit and be like, yeah, Davy Crockett tried to surrender to us. They could have put a lot more salt in America's early wound. Saying Davy Crockett was soft and did this and tried to talk his way out of it. It seems like they didn't really do that, which, I mean, I don't know. It seems like an opportunity for them.
Yeah, I agree.
So I don't know. I mean, I'm going to hammer the money on Davy Crockett because I'm American.
So you're going he fought to the death.
I'm going he went out swinging. I mean, just by crossing that initial line, he essentially fought to the death,
I agree. I that's why I think it's a little semantical, because even like the end of that article said, like, even if he surrendered and then got tortured and then murdered, like that happened to Mel Gibson in Braveheart, and he was a hero. He wasn't thought any lesser of. So I don't even understand the spin that it's any lesser. I think it's just historians are trying to find the truth, and people are like, "You're trying to demean him. He went out fighting." It's like, well, no. I just want to know. Still a hero. Still fought for what died of what he believed in.
Still a hero. I'm saying he went out with a blaze of glory.
Yeah. How about this scene I'm going to show you, and I'll put it on here a little bit. This is from the Billy Bob Thornton one. He plays Davy Crockett, and in that movie they have him be a violin player, which I don't know if that's true.
Sure.
Santa Anna's army is playing their marching song, like "We're About to Kill You," but in military band. He picks up his violin. I'm going to show you, and I'll play the audio for the listeners. And lulls them to sleep with a beautiful violin solo. Is this the Davy Crockett you like?
I mean, like half.
Do you think Santa Anna's army would stop and be like, wow, that's a beautiful violin. Let's stop our playing and listen to him?
What movie was this? I missed that part.
The Alamo.
So this is supposed to be true?
It's their take on the Alamo. Pretty wild, right?
I mean, I guess my only possible response to that would be that just music in general was viewed a lot differently back then. And that would be the equivalent to someone today like coming out and ripping like some John Mayer on the guitar before a big battle, or like some Hendrix.
Yeah,
and just letting it rip. Like the violin wasn't as viewed as we view the violin nowadays, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, well, my little sister learned how to play violin when she was like in 6th grade, and it was the worst week of ever. Like, beginner violin might be the worst noises that can be made from an instrument.
Right.
It just sounds like 100 dying mice.
Yeah, that's true, I guess.
Yeah. All right, so Davy Crockett. Jake gonna stick with the hero because why not?
Going for it. Nothing to lose.
I'm gonna say still a hero, but the fact of the matter is he surrendered and tried to talk his way out. Still heroic. We solved another mystery. Laughs from the past. The Alamo's an interesting story. Maybe we should go there. We'll take a trip.
Okay.
And remember the Alamo, I guess, is the final message.
Amen.
And see you next Tuesday for another episode of Laughs from the Past.